Welcome to Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt of the Marquardt Law Firm at marquardtlawfirm.com.
Welcome back to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt here on 9:30 a.m. The Answer, and also on podcasts everywhere. You can find me on Facebook Live or on YouTube as well. So we've been talking about succession planning, executive retention, exit planning, continuity planning, and now it's time for the legacy segment.
And now, it's time for the Talk Law Radio Legacy Spotlight. What's your legacy? Sponsored by Marquardt Law Firm.
So to begin the legacy segment, I wanted to ask you about Fred Koch. He was in the oil business, and the reason why I came across it was because this was one of those businesses where one guy created this huge oil refinery empire and was going to pass it down to his kids. And his kids found a letter that Dad had written 30 years before he died, and part of it said, quote, "If you choose to let this money destroy your initiative and independence, then it will be a curse to you, and my action in giving it to you will have been a mistake," end quote. So what happened is there were 4 sons, and after their dad passed away, I think it was 1967, they went about fighting for the company. Now, one son, the oldest, wasn't very much involved, but over the next 40 years, they would be in litigation with one another. And their mother, shortly before she died, there was a will contest because she wanted to write a provision in her will that said, if y'all are still litigating with each other after I'm gone, then you lose your inheritance. And so there was a big fight over that. What can business owners do to prevent this from happening to them?
Be more proactive about communicating what is going to happen to the next generation if they're going to inherit the business. They need to know, if you in the case that you just mentioned, you have 4 kids. I have a situation that we worked out a few years ago where only one kid was going to be in the business and the other 3 were scattered around the country. But in the will, the business was split evenly. So guess what? The one person taking all the risk and running the business didn't even have voting control.
Yeah.
I was like, think about this. This is the proactive stuff. We need to have a family meeting and talk about, what are you going to do? What are your plans? Here's what I want to leave. Here's how I want to leave it. Mm-hmm. And, about setting up the dynasty trust and what have you. I want to make sure that you don't have assets that are subject to creditors, including divorce.
Yeah. Divorce rate is about 50%, so you don't know who it's going to hit.
Who's getting the bad lottery pick, exactly.
Right. Okay, so have you seen that show on HBO called Succession?
I have. It's a good show.
It
is a funny show. I will tell you, I think my next hire is going to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist, because there's so much that goes into family business. I mean, you're in a CEO group, a Vistage group, and you're dealing with family businesses. You're dealing with emotion as much as financial.
That's right.
You really are.
And the person that you were talking about that was going to leave the business equally, I always ask my clients, is your philosophy about equal, or is it about what's fair?
Correct, because it's not always the same.
Right.
I mean, it's one thing. If you're splitting $1, everybody gets a quarter, that's fair and that's equal.
Right.
If you're splitting $1 and a business worth $1, then I could argue that it's not.
Yeah.
And it usually I'm right.
Yeah. because like you said, one person's taking the risk, and then you have these other people that are trying to tell you how to run the business that don't know anything about it.
Correct. And it's one of my, I know you talked about the Koch family, but I'm a John Grisham fan, and one of the books he wrote is a testament. And I'm not going to spoil it for the listeners, but it is legacy planning in fiction, but it is amazing.
I'll have to read that.
Yeah, what happens in that book.
So when you spoke to my Vistage group, one of the things you talked about was how to talk about business succession planning to older people. There's like a whole philosophy and methodology to that.
There's been studies that have shown, in fact, there's a book that a friend of mine wrote that is a PhD and an MD, and it's called Saying It to Seniors, How to Say It to Seniors. And there's a phenomena that occurs when people turn age 70, their mortality starts staring them in the face, and it's the life cycle. They're almost like teenagers again, where all of a sudden every decision that they're being suggested or being told by their kids, what you need to do is move next door to us so we can take better care of you, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And they dig in, like teenagers do. They dig in. And so in my case, I'm 59. I want to make sure my succession plan is done before I turn 70 so I can eliminate that chance. And by the way, it's not on the 70th birthday. It could be 72, whatever. But it's around that time where the business owners are so wrapped up in their identity of owning the business that they're afraid to let it go because there's no plan.
Yeah, and then if you're selling the business before then, I've heard of business owners that are just lost because of that same thing too.
They're scared and they're lost. Mm-hmm. And the spouses, whether the spouses are male or female, are so relieved to know that there's a plan that can just about take anything into effect. It's the lack of a plan that causes the anxiety.
Yeah. I think that they should start thinking about what am I going to do next,
right?
So that's part of the plan, so that they don't go off the rails.
Correct. That's absolutely accurate.
Yeah. Okay, so the legacy segment is sponsored by Marquardt Law Firm because we focus on business and estate law, and so I like to talk about it. One definition of legacy by Mark Landers and Rob Rose was an analogy to sports. Good players leave behind memories, banners, and trophies. Great players leave behind a culture, values, and standards that create a sustainable advantage each year. That's what you're talking about.
Absolutely. I could not agree with that.
Passing down the business, you got to teach them those values first.
They don't need to learn the values of the business or how to run the business after you passed away or become where you can't even speak about it because you have an illness. That's a train wreck. Proactive always beats reactive planning.
They also said the story you leave behind for others to tell, that's a good definition of legacy, or the impression you make on the next generation. Not comprised of money or material things, but of character, conviction, and compassion. So tell us, Jim, what's important to you about your legacy?
I have one son. He's a 20-year-old at the University of Texas. He's my best friend, great young man. I'm very proud of him. And I want him to know, and I'm very close to my nieces and nephews and their kids, and I just want them to know that my expectations are of anything that I leave behind, that they steward it and that they make sure that they uphold the family values and add to their values that they create within their families. But there's expectations to not be unproductive citizens of society. I don't want anybody eating bonbons on the West Coast and waiting for their check to arrive. That's not going to happen in my plan.
Good. Those are very clear expectations. I haven't yet defined my expectations in that way, so I think I'll start working on that for my kids. I've just been trying to live the example. I've been teaching them how to work. They started working in my business in the shredding department when they were very small kids. That was something that they could do.
My father, as I wish he would have just stated these to me, but one of my memories was when I was young, I'd picked up rocks with some friends of mine for $1 an hour. And my dad always told me, he said, if you don't want to go to school, someone will always pay you to dig a ditch or pick up a rock. And my first semester of college may not have been just my banner start out of the gate. And I got a box, and there was no note, no address, no anything, and just a box with an empty box with a rock in it. It was shipped to me.
That's so funny.
I got the message.
Yeah.
I would have rather had a sit down with him to talk about it, but I got the message nonetheless.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so you always lay out the expectations. Any special heirloom that you've received or that you would want to pass down, something that represents a memory?
Two, actually. They are, one is my two sisters and I received, my mom passed away when I was young, when I was 13. We received a diamond from my mom's wedding ring, and my sisters have a necklace. I had a ring, and my son has that ring now, and he wears it right now,
That's
going to class
awesome.
and everything. That's really neat. And the other thing is I have a single-shot .22 rifle that was my grandfather's. So I'm passing it down to my son, so it'll be his great-grandfather's.
Oh, wow.
So those
Cool.
are the two. Notice I didn't say anything about money.
That's right. Only the things that really mean something. I got a 22 from my grandfather also. So I'll remember him. He passed away when I was young, and I didn't get to have any really deep conversations with him because I was just a kid. But if you learn anything today, it should be proactive communication and proactive planning, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So if you had to sum up your everlasting legacy, how would you say it?
Start now.
Okay, well, thank you for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank
I've
you.
enjoyed it.
Appreciate that a
Yeah.
lot. Thank you.
Okay, so you've heard it here on Talk Law Radio. Next week, we're going to be talking about mindset and dysfunctional labor maneuvers in childbirth. Don't worry, I'm going to be just as surprised as you are. I have no idea what to expect. Remember to subscribe to Talk Law Radio on YouTube. This is Todd Marquardt. I'll talk to you later.
This has been Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt, brought to you by the Marquardt Law Firm. You can learn more at marquardtlawfirm.com. And be sure to listen to the full Talk Law Radio show Saturday mornings at 11 on 9:30 a.m. The Answer.
Each week, attorney Todd Marquardt talks about the law. His mission with the Talk Law Radio show and podcast is to help you discover your legal issue blind spots. In the beginning, God had one law. Don't eat from the fruit of that tree. Then came the 10 Commandments. Now we have federal, state, and municipal lawmakers that won't stop creating new laws. Laws that might impact you without you knowing it. Listen to the show and drop a line on Facebook or email host@talklawradio.com and let the host know what you think of the show, the topics you want to hear, and whether you want to be a guest.